At a lawyer's office on Father's Day, my wife laughed, "You're signing away your worthless life." I signed silently. 17 days later, her new investors froze her bank account. The glow from my monitor cast harsh shadows across my office as I stared at lines of code that would eventually change the financial world. 3 years had passed since I walked away from my position as CTO at Helix Systems, a comfortable 7-figure salary, stock options, and the whole package to pursue what everyone else called a pipe dream. I called it Prometheus. At 38, I'd become a ghost in my own home, haunting the third-floor office of our Beacon Hill townhouse in Boston. The house itself was a testament to my previous success, bought partly with Helix shares I'd cashed out to fund Prometheus. My blockchain protocol wasn't just another cryptocurrency. It was a revolution in decentralized consensus that could process transactions without surveillance, the kind of thing that makes governments nervous and libertarians ecstatic. "Dada?" I blinked, suddenly aware of Lily standing in the doorway. My 9-year-old daughter, still in her penguin pajamas, despite the late hour, clutched a paper in her small hand. "What is it, sweetheart?" I glanced at the time. 11:20 p.m. I'd been coding for 14 hours straight. "My volcano model, it's due tomorrow." Her voice was small, uncertain. "You said you'd help me finish it last weekend." "The science project shit." "I'm sorry, Lily, I just got caught up in..." "Mom said not to bother you." Her words came out flat, rehearsed. "She said you're busy making money that isn't real." The comment stung like a slap, not because it came from my daughter, but because I recognized my wife's words in her mouth. Sienna had been planting these seeds for months. "That's not true, Lily. What I'm building is very real. It's just complex." She shrugged, already turning away. "It's okay. Jake's dad helped him with his project. It got an A." After she left, I checked my phone. 17 missed calls from Sienna, all deleted after ringing. Not accidental, calculated. She was building a paper trail of my neglect, documenting every missed dinner, every forgotten school event. When Sienna came home at 2:17 a.m., I pretended to sleep. The scent of expensive whiskey clung to her. As she moved through the darkness, I'd never seen the black dress she wore before. In the morning, while she showered, I checked her purse, something I'd never done in our 12 years together. A receipt for $310 from Oriel, that new place downtown. A membership card for the Crescent Social Club, one of those exclusive spaces where Boston's tech elite networked, and a condom still in its wrapper. These nights out with friends had been increasing mysteriously, coinciding with my Prometheus development milestones. When I asked Lily about her mother's absences, she'd simply say, "Mom says she needs to talk to grown-ups." Or more disturbingly, "Mom says only grown-ups understand real value." The pattern became clear, but I needed confirmation. It came in the form of an unexpected visitor, Professor Lionel Kerr, my old MIT mentor and the first person who'd explained decentralized consensus theory to me. He arrived unannounced one afternoon, bearing deli sandwiches and genuine interest in my progress. "The Sanderson Fund is looking for breakthrough blockchain projects," he mentioned casually as we reviewed my code. "Word is they believe Prometheus might be their only shot at dominating the decentralized currency market." As he praised my technical approach as more pioneering than what MIT's labs are producing. I noticed Sienna hovering in the doorway. Something shifted in her expression, and the dismissive look she'd worn for months transformed into something calculating, assessing. Later that week, scrolling through social media, I saw a photo from a charity gala. Sienna stood alone, wearing a dress I'd never seen beside a man whose hand rested too comfortably on her waist, distinguished, expensively dressed, confident. I assumed he was just a dance partner, a random socialite. I was wrong. The man was Cameron Blaine, and he was already rewriting my destiny. That night, checking my server logs, I discovered an unfamiliar device had logged into my Prometheus repository. The device ID matched Sienna's MacBook. I didn't yell. I didn't confront her. I simply placed my hands on the keyboard and began typing out the countermove of my life. 3 days after discovering the breach, Sienna casually dropped a name over breakfast. "I met someone interesting at the Crescent Club," she said, stirring her coffee with practiced nonchalance. "Cameron Blaine." He's the CEO of Crescent Capital. They specialize in blockchain investments. I kept my expression neutral, spreading jam on my toast. He was extremely impressed by the Prometheus concept. She watched my reaction carefully. We only talked briefly about it. The lie hung between us like smoke. She hadn't mentioned Prometheus to me in months, dismissing it as my obsession, my midlife crisis. Now suddenly she was discussing my proprietary protocol with strangers. I smiled, playing the oblivious husband. You should invite him over for dinner. Could be an investor. The words tasted bitter, but I needed to see how far this would go. She hesitated, then forced a smile. Maybe I will. A week later, we met Cameron at the rooftop restaurant of the Valor Hotel. He arrived 15 minutes late, a power move, wearing a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The vintage Mont Blanc watch on his wrist screamed old money, though I'd done my research. Cameron Blaine was new money, and not as much of it as he pretended. Declan, he said, extending his hand with practiced warmth. Finally, Sienna speaks so highly of your work. Over drinks, he leaned forward. Is it true that Prometheus is the first anti-surveillance protocol to achieve 4-digit TPS? I nodded, though alarm bells were ringing in my head. That specific metric wasn't public knowledge. I'd only shared it with Lionel, and in my private notes. I'd love to see the technical documentation. He continued. As luck would have it, I brought something. I removed a USB drive from my pocket and slid it across the table. The Prometheus Final Draft PDF. Still in development, of course. What I didn't tell him was that this version contained subtle alterations, bait for my trap, functional enough to pass initial tests, but with critical flaws that would emerge only when deployed at scale. Cameron picked up the drive, his fingers closing around it like talons. My technical team is exceptional. If this performs as described, I could push through a pre-funding round of $5 million. He smiled at Sienna. We move quickly when we see potential. The following week, Sienna attended a Crescent Capital networking event. Photos appeared on Business Boston's website. My wife, in a dress I'd never seen, laughing with Cameron, whose hand rested on the small of her back. The caption read, Crescent Capital CEO discusses emerging blockchain opportunities with Boston's tech elite. That evening, I overheard Sienna's friend on the phone through our bedroom wall. She thought I was working in my office. She's about to trade up big time. If Blaine invests, she won't have to live with the tech nerds anymore. Can you imagine? From coding drones to Crescent Capital. When Sienna came home at midnight, whiskey on her breath, she kissed me perfunctorily. You should thank me. She murmured, a half smile playing on her lips. I'm paving the way for your crypto dreams. That night, I installed a keylogger on our home router. 3 days later, I had what I needed, a chat log. Sienna. Are you sure you understand everything? Declan keeps all the code in that directory. Password Lily704. Cameron, perfect, sending it to the dev team. Now forwarding to our Asian partners as well. My heart stopped. Lily704, our daughter's name and birthday. She'd used our child as a password and then shared it. I printed the conversation, laminated it, and stored it in my safe evidence for when I would need it. The next violation came when Lily showed me an Alexa pet, a $600 AI doll that Cameron had given her. I disassembled it that night while she slept and found an active GPS tracker and the data collection permissions enabled. I hired a private investigator who photographed Cameron taking my daughter for ice cream. The caption on his private Instagram, future stepdad duties. It was time to complete the trap. I created a dummy version of Prometheus, identical to the real protocol, except for 12 critical lines that would cause the entire system to collapse spectacularly if implemented. I named the file Prometheus Final Algorithms on ours no encrypted zip, and left it where it could be found. At dinner, I mentioned it casually. Making good progress on the final algorithms, just need to iron out a few encryption issues. Sienna's eyes flickered just for a moment. That night, Lily curled up in my lap as I read her a bedtime story. When we finished, she looked up at me, her small face serious in the lamplight. Mom says Mr. Cam is going to make our family happier. she whispered. I held her tighter. My mind suddenly crystal clear. This wasn't just about stealing my code anymore. They wanted my daughter too. My entire life. Don't worry, sweetheart, I said, kissing the top of her head. Everything's going to be just fine. But in my mind, the alarm bells had transformed into a battle plan. They weren't just stealing my code, they were stealing my family. And I would give them everything they wanted in a way they would never forget. The transformation began subtly. I stopped shaving regularly, let my hair grow disheveled, started wearing the same clothes for days. Each carefully calculated move was another brushstroke in my portrait of a man falling apart. I canceled 2 parent-teacher conferences for Lily, something I'd never done before. The school counselor called, concerned. I mumbled excuses about work, stress, my voice deliberately unsteady. Is everything okay at home, Mr. Royce? She asked. Fine, just navigating some challenges. I hung up before she could ask more questions. In the bathroom medicine cabinet, I left a bottle of prescription antidepressants with a Massachusetts General Hospital label. A prop filled with vitamin C tablets and the attached paperwork diagnosed me with acute stress disorder following financial destabilization. Then came the bank statements. I made sure they arrived when Sienna was home, showing our joint account plummeting by 62% over 6 weeks. In reality, I'd moved those assets to cold wallets through a series of proxy accounts that would be impossible to trace without blockchain forensics expertise. At dinner one night, I pushed food around my plate listlessly, while Lily watched with worried eyes. I feel like I've failed, I said quietly, my voice breaking slightly. Maybe your mom was right all along. Lily said nothing, but that night when I tucked her in, I spotted a folded paper under her pillow. I waited until she was asleep before retrieving it. In her 9-year-old handwriting, "Don't give up, Dad." My heart twisted. I wanted to tell her that this was all an act that her father hadn't broken, but the charade had to continue for her sake. Most of all, Sienna's behavior changed as she sensed victory approaching. She no longer bothered concealing her contempt. "I'll be the smartest man in the room," she said one morning at breakfast, while Lily sat silently eating cereal, "and here you are, losing everything." She changed our home Wi-Fi password without telling me. I noticed but didn't react. I'd been operating off a secure mobile hotspot for weeks, anyway. Routed through 3 VPNs, then came the email that confirmed they were entering the endgame. Cameron to Sienna. Friday, we finalized full IP transfer, closed the Royces chapter. Nuhar, I printed it, added a SAA256 verification hash to prove content integrity, and stored it with my growing evidence collection. The end was approaching faster than even I had anticipated. On Father's Day morning, Lily knocked on my bedroom door. She carried a tray with burnt toast and coffee so strong it could strip paint. "We have a surprise for you." Her smile was genuine, even if her eyes carried the shadows of our disintegrating home. Sienna stood in the doorway behind her, wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She held a new silk tie. "Tradition says you need to be blindfolded," she said with forced cheerfulness. I feigned surprise and gratitude, allowing them to guide me to the car. I noted the time on my watch, 9:07 a.m. The GPS tracker, hidden in the lining of my jacket, would record every movement. After a 20-minute drive, we arrived not at a restaurant for brunch, but at a gleaming office building downtown. When they removed my blindfold, I found myself in a plush conference room facing Tamara Briggs, Boston's most notorious divorce attorney, known for decimating husbands' assets. "Mr. Royce," she said crisply, "please sit." On the polished mahogany table sat an 80-page divorce filing. Sienna pushed it toward me, eyes gleaming with triumph. "It's quite straightforward," Tamara explained, Mrs. Royce is requesting 75% of all assets, full custody of Lily, with supervised visitation for you, complete ownership of all intellectual property related to Prometheus, and your departure from the family home within 48 hours. From a chair in the corner, Cameron watched like a vulture eyeing wounded prey. His smirk told me everything he thought he'd won. Sienna leaned forward. "Just sign it, Declan. Retain whatever dignity you have left." I took my time reading each page methodically. letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. Occasionally, I nodded, "I see," I murmured, turning pages with deliberate slowness. When I reached page 17, the IP transfer section, a small, involuntary smile flickered at the corner of my mouth. Only Tamara noticed her eyes narrowing slightly. I signed my name with steady hands. "Declan Roy Royce," I said, pronouncing each syllable carefully. As I completed the final signature, I set down the pen and looked directly at Cameron. "Good luck implementing that system." His brow furrowed slightly. The first indication that something might be amiss. Sienna must have sensed it too. She quickly ushered Lily out of the room, ignoring my daughter's tears and confusion. The poor child had no idea what was happening, only that her family was being torn apart. As I walked out of the building into the blinding Boston sunlight, I felt strangely light. In my mind, only one sound echoed: a countdown clock. They had just activated their own demise by my hand. While they celebrated their victory, I would be setting in motion the most elaborate trap of my career. They thought they'd stolen my life's work, my family, my future. What they'd actually taken was a ticking bomb designed to detonate at precisely the right moment. I checked my watch, 10:43 a.m. Phase 1 complete. The real Prometheus was about to rise from the ashes. I found a small apartment in South End, a neighborhood no one would expect me to choose. It was cramped, minimalist, and most importantly, invisible. No doorman, no security cameras in the hallways, spotty cell service. Perfect. 3 days after signing the divorce papers, Lionel Kerr arrived from California on a red-eye flight. He came alone, carrying only a battered leather briefcase that contained quantum encryption equipment worth more than the building we were standing in. "You sure about this, Declan?" he asked, setting up the hardware in my bare-bones living room. "Once we deploy the real Prometheus on an air-gapped system, there's no turning back. They've already taken everything else," I said, connecting cables to a cluster of custom-built servers. "Let's see how they like what I've left them." For the next 36 hours, we barely slept, subsisting on black coffee and takeout. By dawn of the third day, the true Prometheus protocol was alive, running on an isolated network completely disconnected from the public internet, 12,000 transactions per second, self-error checking algorithms, zero metadata footprint. "It's beautiful," Lionel whispered, watching the performance metrics scroll across the screen, like watching a perfect predator in its natural habitat. While we worked, Cameron was busy selling the altered code I'd fed him. My intelligence sources confirmed he'd traveled to Shenzhen, China to meet with a consortium of investors hungry for next-generation blockchain technology. They paid him $36 million for what they thought was revolutionary software. I accessed a shadow monitoring system I'd embedded in the fake protocol. Within hours of their first deployment test, the logs began reporting exactly what I'd designed them to. Transaction delays increasing exponentially, user data leaking through cryptographic holes, security vulnerabilities appearing in supposedly secure channels. "Trigger the kill switch," Lionel asked, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I shook my head. "Not yet. Let them sweat first." I'd built a self-destruct mechanism into the counterfeit code, a recursive error that would cause catastrophic failure precisely 72 hours after deployment if the system detected an invalid checksum. And I'd ensured the checksum would always be invalid. Lionel watched the dashboard with a mixture of awe and horror. "You're a monster when betrayed, aren't you?" "I'm what they made me," I replied quietly. While the technical trap was unfolding, I launched the legal counteroffensive. I hired a boutique law firm in Cambridge, specialists in intellectual property theft, and filed a countersuit against Sienna with damning evidence. Unauthorized server access logs showing her laptop's unique identifier. Proof she had transferred proprietary IP to a third-party, documentation of how she had manipulated our daughter as part of their scheme. The most devastating piece of evidence came from the AI doll Cameron had given Lily. Its embedded recording system had captured Sienna telling Cameron, "Once we have the code, he'll have nothing left. The kid will forget him soon enough." With the trap set, I reached out to Lily for one final piece of the puzzle. "Remember that hollow tree behind the house? I asked during our court-mandated visitation. She nodded solemnly. I need you to hide something there for me. I handed her a weather-sealed case containing the original Prometheus code and supporting documentation. Don't tell anyone, not even Mom. The next day, I retrieved the drive. The mud on it was still wet. My daughter had done exactly as I asked without hesitation. The court ordered a custody reassessment. When interviewed by the court-appointed psychologist, Lily revealed things that changed the entire complexion of the case. Mom made me meet with the strange man lots of times. She told me Dad doesn't need me anymore, just his computers. She said I should start calling Mr. Cameron Dad soon. The judge granted me temporary custody with Sienna restricted to supervised visitation. Only Cameron's panic began to show. He sent an increasingly desperate email to Lionel. The system isn't performing as represented. There are critical architecture flaws. I'll pay $200,000 for emergency consultation. A day later, his offer increased to $500,000. Then the email stopped altogether. I didn't respond to a single one. That night, Lily fell asleep beside me in the sparse apartment, clutching the stuffed daughter I'd given her years ago. I gazed out the small window at Boston's twinkling skyline, while monitoring the system logs on my laptop. A notification flashed across the screen. Sabotage protocol triggered. I took a sip of whiskey, closed my eyes, and whispered to the empty room. Welcome to hell, Cameron. In 72 hours, exactly, their entire system would collapse, taking with it Cameron's reputation, investor relationships, and $36 million of other people's money. Meanwhile, the real Prometheus was safely in my hands, ready to emerge when the time was right. They thought they'd stolen my life. Instead, I'd handed them their own destruction. Gift wrapped with a bow, phoenix-like. I rose from the ashes of my former life. 3 weeks after the sabotage protocol triggered, I established Promethean Systems, LLC, a labyrinthine legal structure with 6 nested corporate entities spread across Delaware, Malta, and the Cayman Islands. On paper, the company had just 3 employees. In reality, it was powered by a distributed network of elite engineers I'd cultivated over the years, each bound by ironclad NDAs and paid exclusively in Prometheus tokens through untraceable wallets. You've built a ghost company, Lionel observed, surveying our headquarters, a renovated warehouse along the Cambridge riverfront. From the outside, it looked abandoned. Inside, it housed a network infrastructure that rivaled MIT's best labs. Not a ghost. I corrected him. A shadow. We kept the operation tight. No press releases, no social media presence, no corporate website boasting about our revolutionary technology. Instead, I personally reached out to carefully selected contacts at 3 financial institutions, a mid-sized bank in Reykjavik, Iceland, a private equity fund in Zurich, Switzerland, a microfinance NGO operating throughout Kenya. All 3 had the same mandate: test Prometheus in live environments without attribution. Within 30 days, the results exceeded even my expectations. Transaction processing speeds over 15,000 per second, faster than Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal combined. Complete transaction privacy. Not even we could track the movement of funds once they entered the system. Near zero operational costs, 1/1000th of what traditional financial infrastructure required. Money began flowing through transaction fees into our untraceable accounts. By the 6-week mark, we'd accumulated over $240 million, all legitimately earned, all completely invisible to conventional banking oversight. Meanwhile, Cameron was drowning. My surveillance showed him making increasingly desperate efforts to fix the sabotaged code. The Chinese engineering team in Shenzhen demanded explanations for catastrophic failures that appeared whenever they attempted to scale the system. The error logs I designed displayed a particularly cruel message. Root compromise by Royslayer, auth error, self-delete initiated. The investors panicked, demanding their money back. Cameron couldn't comply. He'd already spent most of it establishing infrastructure and hiring staff for a product that would never work. Civil lawsuits began to pile up. In court, the tide had turned completely. The judge ordered a digital IP forensic analysis, which revealed what I knew: it would Prometheus had been under development for 3 years, with all work originating from my personal IP address. My lawyers submitted a third-party technical report, confirming that the code Crescent Capital possessed was a deliberately modified version with critical flaws embedded throughout its architecture. Sienna was called to testify about her unauthorized access to my servers and the transfer of intellectual property to Cameron. She crumbled under cross-examination, especially when confronted with the recordings from the AI doll. However, I never thought he would... She began, then stopped herself. I didn't understand what I was sharing, but the judge understood perfectly. Through it all, Lily remained my North Star. When the court psychologist asked her about the divorce, she said simply, "I only saw Dad being sad. Mom kept telling me to forget about him." With full custody restored, I moved us out of Massachusetts entirely. We settled in a small town in New Hampshire, where Lily attended a private school with just 12 students in her class. On her first day, she came home and smiled, really smiled for the first time in months. "I like it here," she said. "Nobody knows about the bad stuff." Firm. With our personal lives stabilizing, I executed the final phase of my plan. I released Prometheus to the public, but not through the conventional channels of white papers, token sales, or splashy marketing campaigns. Instead, I quietly sent the code to 12 senior engineers at 5 major financial institutions worldwide. The response was immediate. Within 48 hours, transactions running through Promethean systems increased by 500%. Representatives from the IMF, European Central Bank, and World Bank made discreet inquiries. Financial media outlets began referring to it as the Ghost Protocol, a system that seemed to materialize from nowhere with no founder to credit or blame. Cameron made one final desperate attempt. An email arrived via my legal team. "Let's partner again. I'll pay $5 million for a clean slate. You'll be CTO. I'll take a figurehead CEO role. We both win." I forwarded it to Lionel. We laughed for a solid 20 seconds. "He still doesn't get it," Lionel said, wiping tears from his eyes. "This was never about money." "No," I agreed. "It was about principle." At 3:14 a.m. the following morning, my secure phone rang. Lionel's voice was tense. "Cameron's in Macau. He's attempting to sell something called Prometheus Zero to 3 representatives from a Chinese sovereign wealth fund." I closed my eyes, already knowing what needed to happen next. Activate blind orchestration. Let them buy the illusion with the same price they tried to buy my soul. The trap was set. The net was closing, and this time there would be no escape. Operation Blind Orchestration began with surgical precision. I constructed a fake Prometheus Zero codebase, a convincing shell containing working models, but missing the core blocks that made the real protocol function. Into this hollow architecture, I embedded invisible watermarks using transposed Esche signatures that would allow me to track every instance of the code appearing anywhere on the internet. Through Lionel, we deliberately leaked this poisoned version to Cameron's broker, a shadowy intermediary I'd identified weeks earlier. The bait was set. All we had to do was wait. "They've taken it," Lionel confirmed 3 days later. "Cameron and Sienna are booked on a flight to Macau, meeting at the Mira Vista Hotel, 9 p.m. local time." I nodded, feeling nothing but cold clarity. Execute Phase 2. While they flew across the Pacific, I compiled a comprehensive dossier: flight manifests, hotel reservations, communication records between Cameron and the Chinese investors. Most crucially, I included technical documentation proving that the Prometheus Zero code contained embedded surveillance routines designed to infiltrate secure government networks, something I had indeed planted there. But in a way that could only be attributed to Cameron's modifications, this information package was anonymously delivered to a leaked email address belonging to China's Ministry of State Security. Simultaneously, I triggered a temporary freeze on Cameron's banking accounts through an Interpol financial crimes alert and the result of complaints I'd filed weeks earlier through various front companies he'd defrauded. At 9:18 p.m. Macau time, Cameron and Sienna sat across from 3 representatives of a Chinese sovereign wealth fund in a Mira Vista hotel private suite. The hotel's security cameras, which I'd gained access to through methods best left unspecified, showed Cameron opening his laptop displaying what he claimed was Prometheus Zero, the future of untraceable financial transactions. He boasted unaware that his every word was being recorded and simultaneously translated for Chinese security officials watching in an adjacent room. When the fund representative nodded and said, "Transfer the payment," Cameron smiled triumphantly, but instead of a confirmation notification, the suite door burst open. State security officers entered, restraining both Cameron and Sienna. The laptop was seized and immediately analyzed by technical specialists, who discovered what I'd planted encryption protocols suspiciously similar to those used in China's own government networks. The charge reverse espionage, attempting to infiltrate state financial systems. They vanished into China's opaque detention system. A single brief mention appeared in the South China Morning Post 3 days later. 2 American citizens detained on charges of technological and economic security violations. Through industry contacts, I confirmed what I already knew. No return date expected. With justice served, Lily and I disappeared. We relocated to a seaside villa in northern Spain under new passports, new bank accounts, new identities. No digital footprint connected us to our former lives. I declined the Global Financial Innovation Award nomination that came months later. Fame was never the point. Peace was. Lily flourished at her international school. By 11, she spoke 3 languages and had developed a passion for programming. I smiled the day she wrote her first line of Python code. If trust equals false, then execute revenge. What does that do? I asked. It's just something I thought about. She said, her eyes wise beyond their years. Behind the scenes, Prometheus evolved. The Promethean Foundation, with Lionel as its overseer, directed the protocol's ongoing development, funding research into transparent technologies and anti-corruption measures worldwide. The Prometheus token reached a market cap of $23 billion. I never withdrew a single dollar for personal use. 1 year after Macau, a handwritten letter arrived through intermediaries. If you're reading this, I just want to say I was wrong. I deserve this punishment. But if possible, please let our daughter see me one last time. Sienna's handwriting had changed, grown smaller, more hesitant. I felt nothing reading it. Not hatred, not satisfaction, not pity. Just emptiness. I never replied. As a final measure, I established an eternal monitoring system codenamed Nemesis Protocol. It silently watches global underground economic activities, detecting patterns of betrayal and corruption. It's not for sale, it's not published. It can't be traced back to me. But if anyone tries to replay the game, Cameron and Sienna attempted, I'll be the first to know. Standing on the villa's terrace one evening, I watched Lily rowing across the bay. Her hair catching the golden light of sunset, my phone vibrated a message from Lionel. Neighs. Nemesis detected a hacker group targeting the blockchain platform of a Middle Eastern dictatorship. Activate. I typed, yes, then smiled. Prometheus stole fire from the gods, but I made the gods themselves tremble.